You're listening to Conflict Radio on the Conflict Radio Network. Greetings and welcome to Conflict Radio. Today is April 19th, 2021, and we've got Dr. Gerald Pollack joining us today. He's going to be joining me and Jared. Jared, how was your day?
Doing great. Looking forward to this.
All right, awesome. So Gerald Pollack maintains an active laboratory at the University of Washington in Seattle. He's the founding editor-in-chief of Water, a multidisciplinary research journal, executive director of the Institute for Venture Science, co-founder of Fourth Phase Incorporated, and founder of the annual Conference on the Physics, Chemistry, and Biology of Water. He has received numerous honors, including the Prigogine Medal for Thermodynamics, the University of Washington Annual Faculty Lecturer, the NIH Director's Transformative Research Award, and the first Emoto Peace Prize. He is recognized internationally as an accomplished speaker and author. Well, I guess we're just going to get right to it. Jared, do you have anything to say before we get into this?
As I've been saying for a little while now, I'm just overly excited to do this interview.
All right. I mean, you've written about this guy in your book, right?
Yes, and this is exactly that. People talk about consciousness and Victor Schauberger and Emoto and the rice experiment and the consciousness and water and its ability to store memories or store information, that water itself is capable of transporting information. This man and his work is literally at the forefront of rediscovering and confirming in hard science things that no one has really looked at. This easy water, what he discovered about the phasing of water is how part of the reason you can have those water bridges that I describe and we talk about that were discovered where you can electrify or modify water, and it just has so many properties beyond just, hot, cold, evaporated, frozen.
Yeah, it promises to be a fascinating interview, so let's just get right down to it. This isn't a live show. This is a pre-recorded show. We didn't get Dr. Pollack until real early in the morning, so we actually got up early for this one, and hopefully it's ready in time for tonight's show, but it will be on tonight regardless what time. So let's just get right to the interview. We'll be right back in a minute with Dr. Gerald Pollack right after this.
And welcome back to Conflict Radio. We've got Gerald Pollack with us, along with Jared Murphy. Jerry, how are you today?
Oh, I'm doing fine. I'm now temporarily staying at some wonderful residence in Seattle because my house is getting remediated from mold. And I look out the window and I have a spectacular view of Mount Rainier. Snow-capped, just beautiful, like an ice cream cone. And so it's my pleasure being here temporarily. Anyway,
man, it certainly is beautiful up there. I spent some time on Bainbridge Island, I guess about 20 years ago or so. Had to run that ferry back and forth, and I would just stare at that Mount Rainier in awe every time I was on that ferry. It's beautiful out that way. Is it still cold?
Really awesome. Yeah. Cold? No, it's beautiful. We've had sunshine for the past week. It's delightful, I must say.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, look, the reason we got you on the show is because Jared Murphy, he's with us. He had some very interesting questions for you. So I'm just going to turn this over to him and let him run with it. Jared, how are you today? And go ahead. It's all yours.
Oh, I'm doing great. Thanks for getting this set up. Michael does such a great job of getting us, whether he asks me or sets up our interviews always end up pretty dang amazing, but the man's a pro and he's done this for a lot longer than myself. So, Jerry, I am so
if
excited.
you could just speak up just a little bit, Jared, or move your microphone maybe over or something. You seem a little low.
How about right now?
That's great. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay. No, that's good to know. I'm right here. I'm on top of it. I just want to make sure that it's dead on. What about now? Is that pretty good?
Yeah, that's fine. Go ahead.
Okay, so I know we were talking off air, Jerry. This this work that you've done with the fourth phase of water is so incredibly important. I think for everyone who has not heard this, and I know you've done TED Talks and you've done so many things and you've written on this, but do you want to give a high level review quick of what it was you discovered to start?
Yeah. So we discovered a fourth phase of water. Everybody learns that water has three phases, solid, liquid, and vapor. But we found that there's actually a fourth phase. And this is not merely a laboratory curiosity, this phase. This phase of water exists all over, and especially in your body. Your body. This is the kind of water that actually fills the cells in your body. If you just think about it for a moment, we all think that inside our body the water must be liquid water because we know three phases, and the most likely one is liquid. However, just think about this: you cut yourself. Now, if you cut yourself and all the water inside your body were liquid water, it would come pouring out, you see. But it doesn't come pouring out. And as we all know, and of course, those of us who have dealt experimentally with single cells, it's easy to cut the single cell unless you're really careful. And if you cut it, the water doesn't come pouring out, you see. And so those two experiences are a common experience. That when we cut ourselves, the water doesn't keep coming, doesn't pour out, and the experimental experience of the same indicates that it's not liquid water. Something else is going on, and it actually we found it is this fourth phase of water, and the fourth phase has a consistency that's more like a gel. That's why it sticks. It sticks to the solid surfaces inside and outside the cell. So this is a very different kind of water, which we refer to, as I said, as the fourth phase. And I, if you, Jared, want me to describe a few of the main properties, I can do that. But I'm here to answer questions, not to rag on. So
we dig deep on this show, and what's great about it is I don't have the basic just scratch the surface, isn't that cute, LOL, Insta Snapbook chat questions for you. And this state of water, I think starting at that point, and then we can jump into some of the more I think we'll fast forward to where you're at with the research immediately, and then I think people need to understand how complex. It's very important that people hear that you've done this actual work. So why don't we start with the personalities of it, and then we're ultimately, I think, we'll dig a little deeper for everyone into why this is relevant to from everything from medicine to the peculiar natures of what appeared to be randomness in the universe. I think there's some very serious elements of design involved in all of this.
Okay, so I'm not sure then what you want me. Do you want me to talk about some of the basic properties, or
start with the basic properties, and then we'll jump into something more fun?
Okay. Well, this is fun.
I agree. I super agree. I just don't know. I apologize because I know there are many interviews. You answer these questions, and I know we're a new audience with 54,000 subscribers, but it's totally worth. Even if they've already heard it, go at it again.
Yeah. Okay. So this water, it occurs if you take a glass of water or a container of water of some sort, and you put some material in the water, and the material happens to be hydrophilic, that is water loving. And what do I mean by hydrophilic versus hydrophobic? Hydrophobic is fearing water, and hydrophilic means loving water. And so what that means is if I were to take a hydrophilic material and pour water over a surface, horizontal surface, the water would spread out. And a hydrophobic surface, that is fearing of of water, the water remains like a bead, like Teflon, for example. So back this recircle. If you take a hydrophilic substance and put it in water, the water that's adjacent to it undergoes a radical change. I mean, extremely radical. So the first molecular layer changes its character and becomes this fourth phase of water. And this fourth phase sticks to the surface, sticks to the hydrophilic surface. And then another layer of water sticks to the first surface. And then another layer sticks. And each layer has a hexagonal-like motif to it. It's completely different from liquid water. In liquid water, the molecules are all bouncing around at a fierce number of times per not only per second, but even per femtosecond. However, this kind of water is different. It's more like a crystal, where the molecules organized into hexagons are stable. And that's, you get the first layer, the second layer, and these layers build and build. And we've had some maybe extreme examples where they can build up to, say, 1 million layers, not just 2 or 3 molecular layers. And that's what I mean when I say that that this is not just a laboratory curiosity. There's a lot of it around, and it's all over. So one of the properties being like a crystal, crystals, when crystals form, sort of like ice crystals, for example, they push out all the junk that has been sitting in the water, because in order to get a pure crystal, pure means it's devoid of all the junk or what have you, and it's just a pure substance. And so we noticed this fourth phase of water. We also call it EZ water, exclusion zone, because it excludes, it pushes out. As it grows, it pushes out all the junk from the water. By junk, I mean anything that you can imagine would be dissolved in the water gets pushed out as this crystal forms and builds. So it retains a kind of purity, and we call it exclusion zone, or we called it that many years ago. We discovered it because it excludes, it pushes out substances. And it turns out that exclusion zone, EZ, is of course easy to remember. And so, but it doesn't work, it turns out, in most of the world, because in the US, Z is pronounced Z. In other places, it's Z. So in Europe, we have EZ water, which doesn't flow as nicely as easy water, easy to remember. Anyway, okay, so it's like a crystal. Everything is organized. It sticks to hydrophilic surfaces. Another really important feature is that it's not neutral. So H2O is neutral, but this is no longer H2O. If you actually take the hexagon and do the unit count, it's H3O2. So EZ, or fourth phase water, is H3O2, not H2O. And H3O2 has negative charge. It's not neutral. And we know that the EZ water has to be negatively charged because we stuck electrodes in. We directly made measurements showing that the EZ is indeed strongly negatively charged. Not coincidentally, just like the cell is negatively charged. We can come back to that, but that's another feature, negative charge. And so what happens is, as it builds, as I said, this EZ, or fourth phase, is negatively charged. But what happened to the positive charge? Well, the positive charge is pushed out of the EZ. It exists beyond the EZ. So that means as the EZ grows, the EZ bears its negative charge, and the region beyond the growing EZ has positive charge. And these have all been directly measured. This is not hypothetical or anything like that. And so it means that this is kind of like a battery where you've got negative charge in EZ, positive charge outside. And indeed, if you stick a couple of electrodes in, very fine electrodes that we use, you find that there's a potential difference between the EZ, which is negatively charged, and the region beyond, which is positive charge. And these electrodes provide energy. So you can get electrical energy out of this system because the charges are separated. And then finally, about this, I'm not sure what it's like in your parts, but where I live in Seattle, you can't get something for nothing. Maybe it's different where you are, and you can't get this kind of energy from nothing. You need to put in energy in order to get energy out. When you drive your car, it won't work without fuel. Et cetera, et cetera. And your cell phone needs to be plugged in at night. Otherwise, you won't have connection in the morning. So the buildup of easy water follows the same principles. First of all, you can't get order out of chaos without putting in energy. And I think many people know that. And a good example is I always like is cleaning your office. You put some papers down here and some laptop here and a printer here and some pencils here and et cetera, and pretty soon it gets clogged with debris. And every now and then, and it's easy to do, you just plop papers down. But in order to for it to be ordered again, you got to put some energy into it, right? You take 30 minutes and you put the papers in order, et cetera, move the complicated wires connected to your printer into something neat, et cetera. So to get order out of chaos, and this is a basic thermodynamic principle, you need to put energy in. But you also need to put energy in to separate those charges. You see, so you've got a double burden. And the question is, well, where does the energy come from? And we couldn't figure out the answer for quite a while. And then there was a student, an undergraduate student in my lab who had a little project. And of course, he was doing what he was not supposed to do. He next to the chamber that was sitting on the bench was a gooseneck lamp. And he took the lamp and shined it on the chamber, and the exclusion zone grew enormously in the region that was illuminated. So he called me over and to show me, and I was, of course, astounded, and I thought, well, therein lies the answer. It's light. The photons that are being received, and those photons, the energy from the photons is being converted into electrical energy and order. See, and of course we did some experiments afterward to figure out which wavelengths of light, is it blue, green, yellow, whatever. And so we investigated the entire visual spectrum plus shorter wavelengths, ultraviolet, and longer wavelengths, infrared. And we found that it was infrared. Infrared was almost 1,000 times more powerful than any of the visible or UV wavelengths. So it means if you shine infrared light, EZ builds, and infrared light is essential for the buildup of EZ. So your question might be, if you're thinking, well, where do I get infrared energy? There's no toaster or oven nearby. And so we all know that in the oven the coils are glowing. It's the heat, and the heat is essentially, but not exactly, equivalent to infrared energy. And so it's all around us. Everything is generating infrared energy. It's abundant, and you can prove this to yourself by getting an infrared camera. Turn off all the lights. You can't see a thing. It's black. It's dark. But turn on your infrared camera, whose sensor is sensitive to infrared wavelengths, not visible wavelengths. And voila, you've got a beautiful image of everything in the field. And that's because everything is generating infrared energy. In order to get rid of it, you have to bring it to 0 degrees Kelvin. And we don't want to go there. So essentially, let me just review this long diatribe. The energy for building this, it comes from light, specifically infrared energy. The EZ is negatively charged, and the region beyond is positively charged, and that constitutes a battery. The EZ is ordered. It's not a bunch of randomly disposed molecules. They're all ordered into a crystal, and that crystal has negative charge, and it forms next to hydrophilic surfaces, and it builds many, many layers. So I think I've given you a fairly comprehensive picture of what this is all about. And I must say, anybody who is seriously interested in the evidence and detailing these, my book, it's called The Fourth Phase of Water, and there's much more in the book that presents the evidence and details this in a way I think that's accessible, and the book has become popular. Fourth Phase of Water. Okay, I'm sorry to advertise, but I think a lot of people are interested in, hey, what's the evidence? And the evidence is presented there.
Absolutely, Jerry. No, absolutely. You should definitely, we're going to ask you at the end to repeat it, but half the reason to have you on is for this research to continue, people need to buy the book, among other things.
Okay, thank you.
and this is a great open for the entire concept of the energy, the cost and creating energy. And I know you've been talking about this for a while. So I want to jump right away into where have you gotten with the energy without revealing patents or without revealing anything that's proprietary. Where have you gone with the energy creation side of it? Just for that.
Yeah, we haven't gone too far. So we formed a company several years ago, and the company is called Fourth Phase Incorporated. And the idea of the company is to cross the valley of death between some laboratory observation and something practical. And there are several practical applications that come from this research, but they need a lot of development to reach a point where they're useful for humanity. And one of those is what I talked about, is getting energy from this system. And in theory, it's beautiful because all you need is water and light, and you got it, and you get electrical energy from that. So light is freely available, and water is around. So it's an easy way to solve our energy problem. But there was a second feature, and we spent a good deal of time working on this second feature. You have to decide what to do. You can't do everything, and we started to work on filtration and desalination. And the two of them, let me just explain. As I said, the EZ, the fourth phase, is like a crystal. It's free of impurities. So if you can extract the fourth phase, basically you got a filter. You don't need any physical filter. You just need a system to extract this fourth phase. And not only is that kind of water free of essentially everything. We can't guarantee everything because we haven't measured everything, but we've measured a whole lot of different solutes, particles, whatever, with positive results. So we also began looking at salt separation, because imagine you live in the Middle East somewhere, and you've got plenty of sunlight. Half the sunlight is infrared energy, the heat that you feel from the sun. So you've got plenty of energy, but you don't have drinkable water, very much of it. On the other hand, you've got plenty of salt water around. So you can imagine taking salt water and having a system whereby you just take the energy from the sun, and it's enough to separate the salt from the water, and then you can have drinking water, and it is essentially free. You can do it today with reverse osmosis, but I think many people know that the cost of reverse osmosis, the energy that's required in order to propel the system, is huge. See, and some places in the Middle East, it's not a problem because oil is flowing like water, so to speak, and so there's plenty of energy to put in. But our system is at least theoretically simple. So we've been working on that, and of course we like all companies, limited investment, and we try though to improve the system, to improve the throughput and the efficacy, and we have been working on it, and we've not yet completely solved the problem. So that's the kind of emphasis on it, and also we've also been working on drinking water. Maybe we should defer this. I'm not sure what I'm going to say, and I won't say it in detail. Is that your body is full of easy water, and if one cell is deficient, or one type of cell or something is deficient in easy water, it's not going to function properly. It's essential for function, and so we were developing a kind of water that contains a large fraction of easy water. So when you drink it, you can replenish what's missing. But as I said, I think it's better maybe to defer that, because the water turns out to be absolutely central for health. But anyway, that's as far as we've gotten. We can't develop these practical aspects at the university in my laboratory, because the laboratory is part of the university, which is a state of Washington institution. And so if we develop something that theoretically could be profit-making, we shouldn't be doing it using university facilities. So therefore, the company has to be completely separate from our laboratory, where we do the fundamental research. Hope that answers your question. Okay.
I think it's worth backing up for a second for people. The common thing is stated all the time that, we're mostly made up of water. And you've stated in the past, it's about 2/3, 80%. But the reality is that on the molecular level, I think for people to hear this, is that you've pointed out that's basically 99% plus, right?
That's right. And the reason, or maybe I should not interrupt because of your question, but you haven't finished your question, but I will. And the reason for that, it sounds weird. And this did not originate with me. Somebody else mentioned it, and I started scratching my head. And of course, it's true. And the reason it's true, you can think about it. So we're 2/3 water by volume. Okay. So if you think about that volume, that 2/3, how many water molecules fit into that large fraction? Because the water molecules are so tiny, you need a whole lot of those water molecules. And so if you were to line up all the molecules in your body, the water molecule is tiny. The proteins and nucleic acids are huge. You'd line them up and did a count. Most of them would be water molecules. And if you do the actual count, it turns out it's more than 99% of the molecules in your body are water molecules. And if you think back, and I think those of your listeners who have maybe studied a bit of cell biology or biochemistry, the prevailing view is that those water molecules don't count. 99% of your molecules don't do anything. All they do is bathe the more important molecules of life, the proteins, the nucleic acids. That's all. It's like a bathtub in which these molecules bathe. And all of biochemistry and cell biology is based on that concept, you see. And if that concept is wrong, it kind of means that, you have to begin again from the beginning and think of water as a major player, or at least as a player in what happens in life. And I dealt with this not only in my fourth phase book, but the book prior to that, that's called Cells, Gels, and the Engines of Life. And in that book, I demonstrated that practically every significant process that goes on in your body involves water in some way. Again, this is not what you find in the textbook, but the evidence speaks loudly in favor of this. So, I mean, for example, when a muscle contracts, so in the relaxed state, when the muscles are not doing anything, they're just sitting idly, waiting for a signal to contract. The proteins inside the muscle, and the solids are mostly proteins in all cells, I believe all cells. The water that surrounds them is fourth phase or easy water. However, when the muscle gets a signal to contract, it goes to work, so to speak. That changes completely. And then the water transitions from easy or fourth phase water into ordinary water. And then it's the phase transition of the water and the proteins together as one, so-called phase transition, that creates the contraction. And then when the contraction is over, you go into the relaxed state, then the cell returns to its initial position or condition, where the proteins are back in their normal configuration, and the water also is returning from ordinary water to easy water or fourth phase water. And that's a critical step, because you need energy to do that. As is it, to build easy from ordinary water requires infrared energy, or at least some kind of energy. And that's where the energy is required to return it. So your muscles, for example, if you don't have enough easy water in your muscles, the muscle won't return to its relaxed state. It'll stay kind of contracted up. And I think most of us, after a lot of exercise, have felt that cramps in our muscles, and we need some kind of energy to restore. It could be infrared lamp, or it could be massage of your hands, which also are conveying infrared energy, plus pressure, which works we found in the direction of restoring easy water. So it's a cycle that starts with the relaxed state, and then the activated state of not just muscles, but any kind of cell in your body, secretory cells, nerve cells, whatever, it doesn't matter. It returns, it undergoes a transition from the ordered state to the disordered state, ordinary bulk water, not easy water, and then a return to the fourth phase water and the initial state of the proteins. It's that cycle. And so what I mean to say is that the water is by no means doing nothing but bathing the more important molecules of life. It's a central participant in everything that the body does. So I can blabber on. I'll stop here because I know you've got questions.
Michael, did you have one first?
Go ahead, Jared.
Well,
you're doing great.
I think. Oh, thanks. I think, Jerry, this whole easy phase, it harkens for me back to when, we get this very short period where somebody, there's a double helix to the DNA, and then depending on what the DNA doing, there's a quad DNA, there's a quad helix. And I'm wondering if even in the shadows of, there's so much more I want to talk about easy water and its role and its phasing. One, I'm wondering if there is any indications of maybe even another phase. Have you noticed anything else that seems to be not easy but not water within an organic structure?
Well, I guess you're hunting for the answer, yes, but I'm trying to think of what that might be, and
it's more like you get to have fun. You don't get held to it, but here we get to have a little fun with speculating because you've put so much time into it. The reality is that not only didn't hear it here first, but it's more of just there's a chance to hear any of your speculative thoughts on that.
Well, I like to keep matters simple. It's a kind of philosophy that has developed over the years, and seeing so much in the textbook that is, I'm sorry, but patently wrong, and wrong because it conflicts with evidence, with clear evidence, and also tends to be complicated. And I think Mother Nature. I guess if one could sort of speculate. Mother Nature, in my speculation, agrees with, I guess, many people that Mother Nature works simply and not in a complicated way. And so what I have found, and what I sometimes try to tell my students is, if you read something in the textbook and it looks complicated and you have trouble understanding it, it could be that you're not smart enough to understand it, which is what I thought when I began as a scientist. I began to see mechanisms that looked too complicated for me to understand. I started asking myself questions: how does it explain this? How does it explain that? And it doesn't, or it didn't seem to. And I thought, well, of course, everybody else can understand it, but I can't understand it due to my my brain cells being maybe too dense or something. But I've grown to understand that in many cases, it's not that, although that may be the case with my own brain, but it may also be that it's wrong. See, and I've seen so many incidences where there's something in the textbook, and you try to figure out what is it that they're trying to say. You simply can't figure it out. It just doesn't hang together, and you make the presumption that, well, if it's in the textbook, it must be right. And I think some of us have done that too frequently. And this is maybe a hyperbolic response to your question about another phase, but I don't like to. If we can't understand something, I'm reluctant to say, "Oh yeah, it must be another phase," and sure, yeah, maybe even yet another phase. We can go up to n phases, where n is a large number, because in order to explain a certain phenomenon, it's simplest to just snap your finger and say, "Oh, it must be another phase." I'd like to avoid that if possible, to keep it as simple as possible.
The complexity of it's not even maybe another phase. It's more of even observing the personalities of, like you said, water is so not understood. The pushback from mainstream academia is ridiculous. And just like the joke about archaeology changes at the rate of, the opinions change at the rate of the death of one archaeologist at a time. And that really, and I want you to keep talking. I only paused you for you to click into the mechanics of this. How has been the pushback? I mean, this has been out, your work has been out now for a few years. What has been the pushback to today, or even the acknowledgement of what you've discovered in the course of what you're responding? I will be quiet again.
Well, you don't need to be quiet, because your questions are so interesting. So no apologies.
Well, thanks.
Pushback. So, the pushback has been more limited than I would expect. So a few scientific colleagues have written papers challenging what we have done, and that certainly is pushback. Most of the mainstream scientists have just, with the exception of some, have ignored what we've done. It's as though it doesn't exist. In fact, I just came upon a paper called "A Fourth Phase of Water," published like 3 years ago, and my book came out 3 years or so before that. And it got a lot of hoopla from, a fourth phase of water. And you'd think that they might have mentioned that, hey, somebody else a few years ago published a whole book on this issue, and many journal articles, but no quote whatsoever. And it doesn't irritate me one bit. It's just a sign that the mainstream has paid no attention to this. And I know, for example, there is a conference. They're called Gordon conferences, and they're on different subjects. They usually occur in the summer, and there's a Gordon conference on water, and mostly the people attending this or presenting do simulations, computer simulations of what would happen like to 100 water molecules over a period of some microseconds or less if certain circumstances were to apply. And someone who attends the meeting regularly told me, well, they just act as though they never heard of what you've done. And so, I'm totally
like high school.
Sorry?
It's like high school.
Yeah, it is a bit like high school, but this is supposed to be science, and we're supposed to take account of information that comes in. But science has been like that, from the time of even before Galileo, who suffered from the church because church didn't like the idea that the sun was the center of the solar system, and so they basically put him away into exile, house arrest and such, and he couldn't publish his papers, etc. It's been the same since, although manifested in different ways. They don't burn scientists at the stake, but there can be a kind of excommunication. But what I want to emphasize is, for me, there hasn't been this kind of excommunication. I don't know why, but the people out there, beyond the so-called mainstream scientists, and I'll go back to the mainstream in a moment because there's a lot to say about the mainstream. But the people out there, like yourself and others, have taken this to heart, and I must tell you, the acceptance by the people outside who are people who think, not necessarily people who are in academia. The academia is different, and I want to say a few words about it. But the people out there who have open minds, who are willing to listen to evidence, read the book or listen to the various lectures, podcasts, whatever, the response has been nothing short of amazing. I get letters, emails practically every day, and it's a kind of amusing because this is my quote work. They start with, "Oh, I read your book and this is amazing," or "I heard your podcast and this is so interesting," and then, but I've got a few questions, and sometimes the questions are not more than a few, and I try so hard to answer. I get these emails so frequently. A few per day, even. And I feel totally flattered by the huge interest from the community. So, but I simply don't have the time to answer. I try my best, but my psychiatrist, actually, she's an anthropologist, but she listens to me, told me, your body, which has some aches and pains now, tells you that you need to cut back. And so I had to kind of try to cut back on responding to some of these emails. I try to respond to all, but I simply can't do it because there's so much to do. So let me just say a few words about the mainstream science, and I mean academic science. And reasons why it's really difficult for those people to shift to a new paradigm, even if the new paradigm looks enticing, based on evidence, sensible, etc. They won't even pay attention to it, let alone take it up and think about it and see how that might actually fit their evidence, perhaps even better than the conventional view. And the reason is that they're totally constrained. And this is really a serious issue. And I've been in academia for 50 years, so I kind of know how it happens. And I've also been really active. This is some years ago, in dealing with the National Science Foundation and the National Institutes of Health as a kind of advisor at high levels, meeting with the various directors and the overall director, and putting in my 2 cents on how they should change. And of course, how they should change is that they need to open their minds and their coffers, they're the ones who give the money, to ideas that may be revolutionary, because that's how science advances. And I thought I made some progress early on, but everything quickly reverted to the default position, which is we fund mainstream science only. Maybe that's an exaggeration, but here's how the system works. And so you, maybe Jared or Michael, you guys have an idea, okay? And your idea, example, your idea is the Earth, the sun is actually the center of the solar system. Not the Earth, okay? And let's go the Earth. Let's take the Earth. The Earth is a sphere, okay? It's not flat, right? And you think about this, and you want to get some money to study it, because if it's true, everybody out there is thinking the Earth is flat, because you just look out the window and it looks flat, right? And you could look at the nearby lake and it looks flat. So you want to get some money to study this, because after all, if the Earth is round versus flat, it's going to be really significant in understanding nature. And so you write an application because you want to get some money, and you go to one of these funding organizations. It doesn't matter which one; they're pretty much the same. And you say to them, "Hey, I want to study this. Please give me some money." And I even have so-called preliminary data. What's the preliminary data? Well, I've compiled satellite photos, and every one of them shows that the Earth is round; it's not flat. And also, just to confirm this weird idea that the Earth might be round, not flat, I took a trip around the world. So I started in Chicago. And I went to Seattle, and then Hawaii, and then Tokyo, and I kept going west to Moscow, London, all the way back to Chicago. And I looked out the window, and I said to myself, here's what I ought to see. If the Earth is flat, if I can return from Chicago, go to Chicago and return to Chicago, this flatness must have some edges. It must be a cube, right? How else could I get back to the same? It can't be an infinite plane. It's got to be a cube. So I looked out the window conscientiously, didn't sleep, and I'm looking for the edge, the flat edges of the Earth. And by golly, I could never see it. And I did this several times to make sure that I didn't miss it. I could never find the cubic edge, and I got back to where I was. And so it must be a sphere. So please give me some money. I have these 2 pieces of evidence for you, and it seems to me to be enough to convince you that I've got something going here that makes sense. Please, give me a small fraction of the money that you give out. So what's the probability, Jared, that you're going to get your money?
As we've both written and spoken on, the chances are 0.
Zero. Well, I wouldn't say 0, but
okay,
but pretty close to 0.
Yeah, there's always a maybe. There's always the pill's only 99.9% effective, or 0.87.
Yeah, so we both know. I'm not sure, how much your audience knows. But here's the key, you see, which we both know, but maybe they don't. The gatekeeper sees your application and says, "Oh boy, this is pretty radical. I better make sure that I cover my ass. I better make sure that I recruit the real experts on the shape of the Earth to evaluate this really interesting and radical proposal." So I get all the experts to sit around the table, experts on the shape of the Earth. And who are these experts? Well, they're the flat Earth people. They're the people who have earned their reputations on the little bumps that might otherwise poke through an otherwise flat earth and such, and so they receive your application and they look at it, and it seems pretty cogent to them, but on the other hand, they would not like to see this funded. Why? Because if you're right, they're wrong, and most of us don't like to be proved wrong. And so the situation,
stupid human nature
is getting in the way. And this is a product of the system. And so it means that any academic who wants to, quote, stay in business, which means they want to have money to support their laboratory. They want to put bread on the table of all the people working in the lab, and also their own kitchen, often their own dining room. They need to preserve themselves. Otherwise, they're out. In the cruel academic environment, if you can't get money if you're a scientist of some sort, you can't get money to support your lab. It can be ruthless. They give you a little more opportunity to get the money. You can't get the money, you don't get tenure, you're out. And
right.
You're homeless. I wouldn't say homeless.
Well, Jerry, I've been trying to say this because we do a lot of interviews, and I do a lot of interviews, and I speak on the subject of archaeologists need to be paid not to find what they're supposed to find, and they need to be paid to fail. That is something that is, and I've tried to also put this mental picture out there for universities that are train everyone. Right now, Las Vegas is my example. Back in the early 2000s, very, very at the beginning, in the late 90s into 2000s, that no one knew how to play. People didn't really know how to play roulette or craps. I mean, if you learned by standing there. The theory was if you taught people how to gamble, well, more people would cheat. So the system works good. Don't change it. Well, Vegas, in the order of freak economics, started teaching people in groups how to play games. Well, shock, it led to more people feeling less stupid about playing the games. And instead of playing less, they played more. They lost more. The Vegas community made more money. And I feel like Harvard and Oxford and fill in the blank Ivy League billion-dollar institution that has been, I call it the blinky board. If you stand in front of the blinky board for 1,000 years and it blinks yellow or orange, and then it blinks red, and then someone walks up 1,000 years later and says, "Why are you banging on the control panel of a 747?" Somebody yells heretic and burns you, but at the same time, it's still a 747. You might get a response and might even be in a spectrum of an acceptable answer, but it's not the purpose of that ancient technology. And along with the water and along with the research and everything else, the theory goes to me that instead of spending 99 years at Teotihuacan digging it up, if you plat it out, not over a 6 or 8, but over a decade-long degree, you could franchise out, and I throw this out there for all Ivy League and or schools that have been so academically hubris that they won't even investigate the biology of the Paracas skulls, that maybe you would have, instead of limiting enrollment, you wouldn't be able to keep up. You could literally have 1,000 archaeological students. Oh, I'm working on square kilometer 7 of the Guatemalan LiDAR scan to call site. And they could literally have not a few 100,000 students. They could have 1 million students, and not for 4 or 6 years, but for 10. And instead of spending 100 years analyzing all the layers and the interdisciplinary sciences, I think the freak economics, if they would consider this and be okay with saying, hey, we were wrong about every theory we've ever had, but guess what? We're the university that opened up and found 1,000 facts that nobody knew that was in our own vaults. And we are discovering and tabling and developing. We're throwing out theories as fast as we throw out cell phones, is my thought.
Yeah, well, I mean, ideally that's the way science advances. And, if you ask yourself, how much has science advanced in general beyond the archaeology, but that's certainly included. If you ask yourself how many, we all want scientific revolutions. That's the purpose of science, because it's not to dot the I's and cross the T's. It's to learn something so new that it is not only astonishes us, but leads to technologies that we can exploit for solving the many, many problems that we face in our world. today. So it's the way, it's the way science is supposed to be. And if you ask yourself, today's science, how many of those revolutions have actually occurred? If you just think about it over the past, let's say, 30 or 40 years, I'm not talking now about technologies, not like the Zoom connection that connects us, or the laptops or the iPhones or any. I don't mean technologies, because they've been amply funded by people who, for a profit. I'm talking about fundamental scientific advances. Examples like the splitting of the atom, that's like 75 years ago. Or the structure, the genetic structure, the DNA structure, that's, I think, 65 years ago. The past 30, 40 years, I'm talking about. How many achieved revolutions that have changed our world can you name? And I've asked this question to many people, and the answer usually is duh, whatever. A few people come up with the Higgs boson, but I ask them how that has changed their life or lives, and not very, very much. It just hasn't happened, and the reason we haven't had scientific revolutions, I believe, is rooted in the institutions that support science today. What I just talked about, the round Earth proposal in a flat Earth environment, chances of success are very low, and therefore, at least mainstream scientists avoid proposing anything that's radical. Of course, they have to propose something that's new, otherwise they won't get their funding. But it's usually a minor. It's a nuance of what we think we already know, and that's safe. It's okay. A radical proposal like round versus flat Earth just has almost no chance for success. The reason I put the word almost in is, at one time, I've been thinking radical ideas for pretty much my whole career. And I have actually been reasonably well funded. And I always thought I was the exception. And maybe it's because I have friends, people who were my students who believe in what we do, and they get on the panels. And so I managed to squeak by. I now have private funding, which is really helpful. People who believe in what we do. And so we don't have to go through the system. But I thought that I was the exception. I struggled somewhat, and I was really in bad shape at one period when suddenly a new grant came out. It was I forget the name of it, from the director's office of the National Institutes of Health, and it was designed. I think I may have had some influence in the design as for work that can shake the earth, So it happened right after I was participating actively in these at workshops organized at high levels by the main institutions, and so I think I might have had some influence. And I was one of the first recipients, and that was not the reason I was a recipient. It was not because I had some influence, because it depends on the reviewers, and those reviewers had no information that I had been there early on. So it got a surprisingly good review, and it got funded. And I was the first one out of like 4,000 faculty members at the University of Washington, which caused jealousy among other faculty members. How could this, weird guy, or not so weird guy, but guy with weird ideas have been so successful in getting this? And it made such a world of difference for me, because we could do freely with ample budget for 5 years, whatever we wanted to do that was relevant. And that's what led to many of the findings that appear in the book, for example. And so we were a recipient of a very nice grant, despite the radical nature of, radical is probably the wrong word, because, what we're finding is, it's not radical. It's, I believe it's verging on truth. If you call truth radical, then okay. So we were successful. That's a long circuitous story as to why there are occasions when even people with radical ideas can or could have whatever get money, get funded to pursue their work, but it's very unusual. And most scientists are canny enough to realize that they just better keep quiet. If they've got a radical idea, and many of them do, just keep it quiet, because otherwise you're going to suffer the consequences. It happens almost every time.
Well, and part of this is interesting because there's two roads I'd like to go down. One is it could be an easy digression for the rest of our interview for me to just tell you how you feel about your frustration level with that and your personal experience. But on the other hand, you have a private institution. You have developed outlets for creative thinkers. Do you want to speak on that?
Yeah, you're talking about the Institute for Venture Science?
Yep.
Yep. Okay. I would love to be given the opportunity. So
I can't wait. This is a start, by the way, Jerry. We got to talk about this more. There's no way we'll get this all in for everyone in this interview, but I would love to talk to you about it again. But please, let's go as far as we can with it.
Okay. So having realized that there's a problem in the way science is done some years ago, I'm a problem solver at heart. If there's an issue in science that needs solution or attention, I'm there. And if there's something in you might say our society or scientific society that's not working, I'm there. And I came to realize, in part through the influence of others, that there is a serious problem in the way science gets done. And I've been chatting about that. And being a problem solver, I want to do something about this. And so I thought for quite a while and conferred with many, many colleagues and came up with a plan. And the plan eventuated in something called the Institute for Venture Science, IVS. And the Institute for Venture Science, by the way, the URL, in case anybody's interested, is IV, like in intravenous, ivscience.org. It's a lovely website designed by my son, who's an artist, who also illustrates my books. And what it's designed to do, this institute, is to provide funding for people who have so-called radical ideas who challenge the status quo, especially where the status quo is not working. And so we started this, and we've already gone through our first stages. So maybe before I mention that, just two aspects. Number one, what we want to do is we want to give money for the long term for people who are adventurous and have something fully vetted. The ideas are vetted more profoundly than any institution I know, because we don't want to fund junk. We want to fund promising ideas that can shake the earth. So as one of the criteria we use, how much, if validated, how much will this shake the earth? So we're going to provide long-term funding. But there's one problem that we solve, and it's a problem that you all know about, but it's not taken into consideration. So, Jared, you come up with an idea that the Earth is round, all right, and you even have evidence for it. You get some money from whatever institution to proceed and study your idea, because it's a good idea that has some preliminary evidence. But here's the problem: someone from the Flat Earth Society pops up and says, "Oh, Jared, he's a crackpot. Pay no attention whatsoever." You see, and that comment goes around, gets circulated, and what do? Well, you can't, Jared. You can, but it won't help. Stand up to a little flag that says, "No, I'm not a flake. This is real." It just it doesn't work. Did it work with Galileo? It's not changed. Essentially, it's human nature, and human nature doesn't change. So you're in trouble. And then, of course, another flat Earth people says, "Oh yeah, we knew that Jared was a crackpot from the start. Don't pay any attention to him. You're dead. You can't get anywhere." So, realizing that, the Institute actually deals with it. How does it deal with it? Well, if we want to fund Jared for his idea, we're going to find up to a dozen other laboratories who share his vision that, there's something wrong with the flat Earth. We think it might actually be round. Each one of you using maybe a different technique, a different investigative approach, whatever. And then next year at the annual conference of the Shape of the Earth Society, suddenly a dozen groups come and they report, each one using a different method. If they're right, they report, hey, the Earth is round. And you can't ignore that. When a dozen groups come, suddenly pop up and say, we've got this evidence, that evidence, and so on. They all point to a round Earth. That's the beginning of a revolution. You can't say, Jared may be a crackpot, but then are all of these people crackpots? You see, so
right.
So this is one of the main features of our organization, and we already went through more than 200 pre-proposals, and we picked about 15 of them for full proposals. Again, everything fully, deeply vetted, and from
Jerry, was each one considered a crackpot by at least 10 people?
We didn't evaluate the crackpot score, but we choose
throwing it out.
We choose reviewers who are open-minded. All of the reviewers, essentially all, have been known to me and vetted by me to be fair, open-minded, and open to fresh ideas. We tried our best. We don't want. It depends a lot on the reviewers, and we don't want reviewers who are so wedded to convention that there's no possibility that they're going to give a decent grade to the challengers. And what we do? We actually ask the applicant to provide names of a half dozen people who would naturally object to what they're proposing. You see, and those people, of course, come back with scathing reviews. Jared, this is nonsense because of X, Y, Z. And then you get a chance, Jared, to reply to that. And then we do interviews with you to see, a little more depth what you're thinking. And so we actually invite the opposition to comment, and of course we expect scathing reviews from them, and the more scathing the review and the more you're able to respond, the higher score you're likely to get, because you've responded to the enemy, so to speak, and you've done very well in doing it. So yeah, I don't know if there were 10 on the list of objectors, or higher or lower. Implicitly, of the 5 that we finally selected for funding, I probably think that at least 3 or 4 of them have received scathing reviews. But we've done our work and we've done it well. And we're now at the verge. We have some funds, but not enough to fund effectively. And so we're looking actually for that large initial infusion of funding from someone who believes in science, who believes in fairness, who wants to see science progress, is not impressed by the limited progress of conventional science, and is looking for truth, has done well, and would like to do something meaningful with what they've done in their lives. And I would say that, considering the possibility of donating to the Institute for Venture Science would be a good way to do that. We have some really promising ideas, and if we can fund them, we think that we can restore scientific revolutions to the practice of science. 100 years ago, they were occurring just all the time, especially in physics, with quantum mechanics and relativity and all of these ideas. Practically every year, something new. And that has diminished hugely. We don't have them anymore. And science was different then. Scientists were either came from wealthy families, so they could do whatever they liked, or they had benefactors who would support them because they appreciated their courage and vision in trying something new. But that's changed now, and we would like to kind of bring back the idea of benefactors, and this can be done through our Institute for Venture Science. I'll give the URL once more. It's ivscience.org, ivscience.org, because we would like to hear from you. I would like to hear from you. So anyway, thank you, Jared, for allowing me to mention this. We think this can change the world, and also
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree with you, because this is exactly what I speak about, and I've done. Michael and I got started many months ago doing these shows, and when I'm speaking, I'm trying to explain this to people, and the people I include in my reference, Jerry, are you. And
well, thank you.
and I've been shouting it along with the rest of the chorus of alternative researchers that have been doing this kind of work. But also, I think I try to enroll the listeners that are listening even now, well, that will be when it's released, that their role in, even when they have a hunch or when they get excited or interested in learning on a topic, but when it comes to being paleo, not as a diet, but as a lifestyle, when it comes to the movement culture, like Ido Portal, I'm a Wim Hof practitioner. I met Wim Hof when he was here for the first time in California. I met Wim and practiced Wim Hofing with Wim for the first time.
Wow. They have ice in California?
He was in Treasure Island. He was at Treasure Island a few years ago, but 3 years now. And he gave everyone, there was about 100-something people there, but he was personal with everyone. And we were there, and he taught us all and what to do and how to do it. And we all did the ice together. But I try to explain to people that wherever you are with your personal self-experimentation, that positive gene expression, what you eat, how you actually, not a woo-woo, but an actual meditation that's reactivating your autonomic nervous system, that you are consciously controlling, not just your heating and cooling, your inflammatory response. And there is no way easy water doesn't have something to do with that. And there's no way Victor Schauberger's work and Johann Gronder and Emoto's work there, and what you've done, and it's not even that you're clumped in with the group, it's just simply that the complexity, if you just take it for granted that it's been resolved, well, it's simple. Aliens built the pyramids. Everyone banged rocks 50,000 years ago, and we've learned everything we need to know. And that's not true. And so this institution, archaeologists and people need, having the ability to be funded and fail, but also find what they find. And I think the freak economics of tabling the facts of what was found rather than the long history of burying them for these colonial powers and their, you can't have anyone in Brazil before the Portuguese, even though they have a bay called Amphora Bay, and it's filled with nothing but Roman amphoras. You can't, the Romans weren't in Brazil. Well, we have cocaine and tobacco in Africa. And again, not sexy. It's not mummies. It's not Indiana Jones. But if you have ancient engineered terra preta in northern Africa, somebody explain that. How do you have a Coca-Cola plant making Coca-Cola brand Coca-Cola on 3 continents that weren't supposed to be talking to each other over 8,000 years ago? Through dynastic periods. And so there are too many pieces. And now there's all this, I call it nanoarchaeology. They are now finding, they've published, mainstream academia has published on flora and fauna off the coast in saltwater. They have started to repiece together through sedimentary saltwater remains in the ocean of Doggerland, which that's amazing. And then now there's beyond mitochondrial DNA. They're doing sedimentary analysis of the dust around skeletons. They're starting to able to actually identify DNA on a nano level, that the revolution of not just our eyes on our history, but I think superhuman abilities like the Wim Hof stuff, which, as Wim himself points out, these are all things we forgot we could do, tie into a greater worldwide forgotten, I think more advanced society, but irrelevant to that. The discoveries you made with the water clearly indicate that there is something going on with water that is very efficient, I think very high technology, and absolutely something that, as we learn about it, is dramatically going to affect medicine. And more importantly, you didn't just recognize and create, I think, I'll put a spotlight on one of the most important discoveries, because it does have to do with a paradigm shift in science and accepting things faster. But then you double down and start this institute and actually are backing the very kind of research that we need to get people who even are armchair investigators to participate. And I think there are ways that we can do that. I don't know if you're familiar with Michael Hall out of Seattle, the ufologist and host on Spaced Out Radio.
No, I don't know him.
Well, but he's called the paranormal lawyer. He's served on Supreme Courts. He's a lawyer. He's been in ufology for over 40 years. And he started something called the Academy of Paranormal Arts and Sciences. And the idea was to provide awards and have an event that starts recognizing people that right now is a disparaging science, whether it sounds woo-woo and funny. There are people who are they're getting a result from banging on the blinky board, and they might be calling it paranormal. They might be calling it spiritual. But then you have forensic geologists like Scott Walter or you doing exactly this kind of work where there's very serious science going on that isn't being recognized. And the idea is to create a gathering once a year where you can get recognized for doing work, and at the same time making it available to a broader audience. And I think podcasts like this, like Conflict and Not Aliens, doing what we're doing now, is the only way to get. We have to sidestep the people in the fast lane, is all I'm saying. And we just have to keep creating gatherings, celebrations, and platforms for people to not be banned and discuss it.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you 100%. Discussions are so important, and I also hear that, or sorry, not hear that, but the same thing applies in the area of vaccines. There are actually several points of view about the vaccines, and we hear the standard point of view all the time in the newspapers and the media. But my friends who are dealing with medicine and so-called, I don't like the word alternative or naturopathic, whatever, many of them have evidence that there's something different that's going on, different from what we're hearing from the government. And, I'm not here to make judgment about who's right and who's wrong, but I'm here to make a judgment or a comment that why are these people censored? So my friends tell me that, sometimes they've got something and all they're doing is reporting facts that have been published. And they post something, and within 1 or 2 days, it's off. And so, in science, if this is to be science, again, I don't know which side is right, which side is wrong, but it's absolutely essential that we have debate. When you hear two sides argue against one another, you have a much better opportunity to make judgment on who's right and who's wrong. And that's the way to make progress in all arenas. I
totally agree.
Yeah. Suppressing it doesn't work for anybody.
No. And you know what? I'm not the first person to discuss Terra Preta, but I'm the first person to also discuss from an ancient, I do historical remodeling, and I've had, like, my friend Jennifer Deo, the archaeologist, she's like, Jared, no one's ever looked into this. And my fascination is with the foundations of polygonal constructions, whether it is the Great Pyramid or Sacsayhuaman or Ollantaytambo, wherever you have these giant cymatic earthquake-proof walls, and no one has ever done a core sample of the foundation material because everyone's looking for a mummy or jewelry or writings. They're not concerned that the very foundation of these billions of tons of stone have not been unleveled despite being shaken a little over all these years. No one in archaeology has done that, and I'm putting together an expedition to do that for the first time. What if it's a 40-foot thick foundation material pre-compacted to what we thought was stone, and in reality is actually layers upon layers of of material that may have been crushed and brought in from 1,000 miles away. We don't know, but to speculate, I'm ready to go do the work and need the funding and doing the same process that you're discussing. But in the end of the day, I am also just as excited to share the information, not hide it. Let's get as many. This is literally, I always try to say that our history is not a search and recovery, it's a search and rescue, and that we all have to be prepared to be wrong.
Right. And to be wrong. Absolutely. Yeah.
And then move on, because we're all bright thinkers. The issue then is, if we were wrong, I'm thinking, of course, collectively, that if we put our brains in the right direction, we won't be shining the light on the dead end.
I so agree with you. Absolutely. So cogently expressed.
All right. Well, I'm going to have to bust in here for a second, guys. We're about out of time, but I do have a question for you, Jerry. I wanted to ask you about the water. You said that the infrared light helps turn the regular water into easy water, and I was wondering if you've looked at, you hear many stories about people that are earthing. They're going out in their bare feet and they're walking around in the grass. I was wondering if you've looked at the possibility that the simple process of walking in the grass helps convert your cell water into easy water.
Well, we haven't looked specifically into it, but it's a natural supposition, and I actually have been talking about it somewhat. And the reason it is that the Earth is not neutral; the Earth is negatively charged, and for me, this came as a shock. It started with a Russian guy who was in my laboratory who. He was just leaving my lab to return to Moscow. His flight was in a few hours, and we started chatting a little bit. And he mentioned the Earth's electric field. And I said, Andre, you're talking about magnetic field, right? No, I'm talking about electric field. Don't you know that the ionosphere is positive and the Earth is negative, and there's an electric field between those two? I said, Andre, you must be on too much vodka or something like that. And I went home and I started thinking about that. The next day, one of my students brought me the book of lectures of the famous Nobel laureate Richard Feynman. The volume 2, chapter 9 is exactly that, the Earth's electric field, with ample evidence that the Earth actually had net negative charge. And I was flabbergasted because my education started in electrical engineering. And no professor ever told me that when you take the plug and stick it in the receptacle, that third prong was connected to a vast sea of negative charge. It was always neutral, but that was a kind of presumption, implicit presumption that everybody had. And here I was being educated that the Earth has negative charge. And Andre proceeded to tell me the American education system is deficient because in Russia, every middle school student knows that the Earth is negatively charged. So, and I think he's probably right about the education in Russia versus the U.S. But here's the deal: if you walk without shoes on grass, the grass is connected electrically to the Earth. And your feet are connected electrically to the grass, especially if it's moist. And you're connecting yourself to practically infinite sea of negative charge. Now, we know from our experiments that if you apply negative charge to water, this negative charge creates easy water. We published evidence for that. So if you put all that together, you're walking on wet grass, connecting yourself to the Earth should allow electrons from the Earth, negative charge from the Earth, to penetrate into your body and create easy water, wherever easy water may be deficient in some way. And I think this is the probable mechanism. I mean, people have been earthing or grounding for a long time, and there's been a lot of biophysical research on it and many ideas as to why it works. It does work. Apparently, there are many studies that show health improvement. due to earthing, connecting yourself. You can even buy gadgets now and blankets and all kinds of things that connect you to the earth. And the simplest explanation is that electrons getting infused into your body, building easy water and making you feel better. It doesn't matter what your issue is, which organ is deficient in easy water. This will supply easy water to your body. And so I think this may be the mechanism and the explanation. Thanks for asking that.
All right, that's pretty awesome to hear. So get out there and earth, everybody. Take your shoes off and put your bare feet down on the grass, especially in the morning when there's the dew out there, and feel better.
Yeah,
Jared?
there's this. Yeah, but before you said, I have to say one interesting story that George Washington. I don't know that he was paranoid or such, but he brought his physicians with him wherever he traveled. And one day he got sick, and his doctor said to him, well, the solution is very simple. Just hug a tree. And, it's the same sort of thing that a tree in good health is just full of negative charge, just the same way that we're full of negative charge. And it has more because the electrical potential of plant cells is actually more negative than our cells. You hug a tree. If you're connecting electrically, some of that charge will then get infused into your body. And so maybe George Washington knew something that the rest of us didn't know, or at least his physician knew. Very simple treatments, probably known by our ancestors, probably for thousands of years. It seems to work. So, okay, I had to get that in there.
That's awesome. That's really, really awesome. So get out there, guys. It really does work. Jared, we got about 5 minutes, I suppose, if you want to squeeze in one last or two questions.
Sure. Great. We should stop on easy water. I mean, I know we will not get it all in now, Jerry. Like I said, I'll talk to you about doing another show, or we should definitely do that. But for this question, it's asking about easy water again, and whether or not, well, this ties into you should look into the Terra Preta situation. I think that they're like, well, there seems to be a piezoelectric property. There seems to be electromagnetic properties to this soil, and it's all over. And then these buildings are all polygonal, and it seems to all connect. And it seems to me that the connectivity wasn't just there for that. Our level of banging on the blinky board, we're getting a spectrum of a healthy response of that electron exchange. But then I think it's related to having a more terraformed soil around the planet. But I do think the easy water, and this is the two digressions for the easy water. Is all easy water really the same? And you know how some people get different filters and they produce clean water, but some lack the ionization and or the magnetic properties of a positive, high quality, high mineral water versus distilled water. You know where I'm going with all of it. Is all easy water the same, or is there really just is it relevant to how and where you get it?
Yeah, good. It's a good question that it really deserves a lot more time than we have. And so we look on easy water as that there is a kind of template, it's not that all easy water is the same, is the short answer. And this template that we have is impacted by subtle energies. And I think that's where you're going. So the issue arises about information storage in water, and it arises back 40 years ago from the original publications of a guy named Jacques Benveniste, who produced evidence that water had the capacity to store information. And Benveniste was a prominent French scientist, a really top-level guy who basically lost his career because of publishing a paper in Nature that suggested that water could retain memory. Very interesting story about him, which is in my fourth phase book, but I think we're running out of time to go through it. But at any rate, we organize meetings each year. This year it's in Germany on the physics, chemistry, and biology of water, otherwise known as the Water Conference, waterconf.org, CONF.org. And we have many people presenting papers. And each year, typically, there are maybe 2 or 3 papers who present evidence, people who present evidence that water can store information. Now, if you think about ordinary bulk water, there's no way it can store information, or at least no way that we can envision, because the molecules are all randomly oriented and bouncing around at a furious number of times per second. How can that store information? And this is part of the reason why the results of Jacques Benveniste were ridiculed, in fact. But now they've been confirmed in many laboratories, so there's no question, even though the ridicule. So somehow water has the capacity to store information. And if you think about a computer, you can think about your thumb drive, what's in it? Well, what's in it are a whole bunch of transistors arranged very precisely in 3 dimensions, like points on a 3-dimensional grid. And each one of them has the capacity to be either on or off, or conducting or not conducting, 1, 0. And that's the way the information is stored. And if you think about easy water, it's similar in many ways, not just similar, but actually maybe more capable even. So I told you that there are hexagonal layers that build upon one another. So you have not only 2-dimension within a layer, but 3 dimensions as well. And it turns out that each oxygen, each layer contains, of course, oxygens and hydrogens, just like water. And each oxygen has the capacity to have not 2 different states, but 5 different states. This will be in any chemistry book. If you look on the so-called oxidation states of oxygen, you'll find there are 5, and the most common is -2. There's also -1, 0, +1, +2, which means that in this 3-dimensional array, just like your thumb drive, each oxygen has this capacity to store information. Each one, it could be -2, it could be +1. And given that, if you do the computation, it turns out that the information storage density or capacity exceeds that of silicon current capacity by, I think it was 100 million times or something like this. I don't remember the number exactly, but a huge number of times, which means that, because of the easy water in our body, that our body has the capacity to store information, receive subtle information from sources that we might not think of. Like, for example, I could be receiving information now from Jared, depending on what he's thinking of my irresponsible answers to his questions, or something like that.
Every single one of them.
Every single one, sure, he knows. And so this is a frontier right now. And I guess I'll end by saying that we're doing experiments right now in the laboratory to see whether healers, recognized healers who impart their information, have the capacity to change the physical properties of water. These experiments have just begun. We have no results yet, but we're examining the water before the influence of the healer and after the influence. And we don't know what the result is going to be, but we're open to the possibility that the water might actually change. It might change in response to these kinds of subtle energies, which would open the door to so many kinds of energies impacting the water and impacting, we believe, the easy water that exists in your body. So it's really exciting, and I can't wait to see the results. We're examining using 5 different physical techniques that are widely recognized, and we'll see what happens.
All right, that's pretty awesome, Doctor. And Jared, we're going to have to wrap it up.
Yeah.
Doctor, you want to tell everybody where they can find you?
Where they can find me?
Gratuitous advertising again.
I think the the most significant is to have a look, just have a look at the fourth phase of water. And, you can get the impressions of what's in the book by reading what the readers have had to say about it on Amazon. Like everybody else, these books are sold on Amazon. And I don't have the URL to, I don't remember the URL to connect with our laboratory. But if you look under Pollack Laboratory, Pollack Laboratory, you'll find at University of Washington. It's easy to find. And there's a lot of interesting stuff that you'll find on there. And as for the Institute for Venture Science, it's ivscience.org. So I think with those three, I think that's the major conduit of or conduits of information that I would like to convey. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be on your audio podcast. I've been on many of them, and I really appreciate the really thoughtful questions and yours. So thank you very much.
All right. Well, it's an honor to have you join us. That's for sure. And for everybody listening, the links for everything Dr. Pollack will be down in the description box below. So be sure to go down there and check it out. Jared, we'll talk a little bit after the break. Thanks very much, Dr. Jerry, for coming on the show. And we'll be right back on Conflict Radio right after this.
Welcome back to Conflict Radio. That was Gerald Pollack. Jared, did you learn anything?
Oh, man, he's one of the nicest human beings, just in general. What a, smart, brilliant, and then on top of it, just very easy to talk to.
Yeah, it definitely was an interesting conversation. It's a little weird doing it on Zoom. I hope it sounds okay to everyone. I'm going to run it through some stuff and make sure that all the levels volume-wise are equal to the beginning and the intro and the interview. So hopefully that works out well. Jared, you want to tell everybody where they can find you?
Yeah, notaliens.com, and in another, barely 2 weeks at America's Stonehenge on May 1st. That is a Saturday, and I will be giving a live lecture, which you can get a virtual ticket for $10 if you just want to not go and watch a virtual conference. You should do it. It absolutely would help with the funding and research that's coming up, including America's Stonehenge. For me to do research. And at the same time, I am always doing new interviews and those schedules, and the Forbidden Knowledge News Conference is, of course, posted now on Rockfin. I just did that April 1st and 2nd. And, you and I will be speaking live, I think, Thursday from America's Stonehenge. I think that is Thursday the 28th, right? Or the 29th?
I don't think we finalized that. We could talk about that off the air, but I will not be attending that event in person. I was going to go up there and camp out for a little bit, but due to unforeseen circumstances, that's not going to happen. So we are going to be doing a show with Jared. Will be there. Hopefully we can get some video or something from there, but we'll just have to, I guess we'll see how that plays out. How we're going to do that. But yeah, we're definitely going to be doing something live from there. But I will be here in the studio. I will not be at America's Stonehenge. So I guess that's going to do it for us. So we'll just go ahead and wrap this up. Remember, you can always find us online. Just go to www.conflictradio.net. You can find us on all of your normal podcast catchers, Apple iTunes, iHeart iTunes, and all of your normal podcast catchers. If you're listening to us on Apple iTunes, go ahead and give us a rating if you don't mind. Not too many people rate us there, and I hear it's a good thing to do, to get ratings from people that actually listen to your show. I know some of you are listening there. Go ahead and give us 5 stars and write us in a little comment if you like. That'd be great. Well, that's going to do it for us. Until next time, batten down the hatches and be safe.